What's going on, everyone? Sid Gordon here, Core Medical Podcast today. We are getting very close to the Core Medical event, and one of the gentlemen that has been a part of Core Medical for just under a year, who's sponsoring our event this year and was so gracious to drive down from Sebastian, Matt, is in the house, and I'm very, very excited to chat with him today. We have a lot in common, and you guys will enjoy to meet him at this event this year. He's done some really nice things for Core, and we're gonna have a little chat today. So Matt, thanks for coming on, brother.
Oh man, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor, man. I get up early for a lot of things, but this one was fun.
Good. Yeah, and he drove over 2 hours, got here in the perfect time, and we're gonna have a good show today, guys. So I start with basically a high level background of like childhood, how you grew up, where you grew up, and kind of where your life went from high school on.
All right, that's fair. All right, well, so I grew up in New York City, 70s, 80s, coming to into adulthood, so to speak. It was a rough time in New York. You know, you had to make your way through it. You had to put the work in whatever you were doing. I ended up leaving high school early, got the good enough diploma. You know, traveled up and down. I was a ski bum. I was a whitewater rafting guy, bartender, bouncer. You know, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life.
Nice.
I joined the Army when I was 18. When I was 18 and a half, I fractured my skull, and they said, don't bother showing up next week.
Oh, gosh.
So I went on a completely another tangent. I really wanted to be in the military like everybody else. It's such an honorable thing. Mm-hmm. That time, it just wasn't an option for me. I ended up becoming an emergency medical technician and a paramedic in New York City from 90 to about 2003. And one of the most rewarding aspects of my life, it really was. Mm-hmm. Like I said, my parents had made their life blue collar. My dad was a bartender and a postman. You know, my mom was stay at home, worked in the photo mat in a parking lot for a lot of years. And they gave us the best home they could, you know, and just the area just wasn't a great place. It was just blue collar Queens, New York.
Yeah, I had Nick on the podcast the other day, and I was talking about, you know, the difference of this group of kids coming up now versus when we were kids. I got all my hard work and drive from my mother. She worked at a daycare center her whole entire life. I don't think she ever made more than $38,000. After that, she would then leave and go work as a nanny till about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then back at the daycare at 5 a.m. and repeated that process for 35 years.
But that's what builds us.
Not once did she ever complain to me. Mm-hmm. She never complained about it. Right. And my father was a different story. And when I look back on it, I see why I had the childhood I had. Mm-hmm. That was the best that they could do with what she had and what she provided. My mother never once was like, oh my God, I got to go to work today, or, oh, I had such a shitty day. She never complained. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the biggest reasons why we have kids these days that are such pussies and such complainers is because they hear it from their parents.
Right.
And I'm a big believer that it's very similar to this. You have a buddy who's always complaining about his fucking girlfriend. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm breaking up with her. I'm done with her. I'm completely done. And then next week they're on the steps of the chapel getting married, right? How stupid does that look? Oh. Right? It looks, I mean,
definition of crazy.
Hey, don't get me wrong. I've done it, but it looks bad. Mm-hmm. That so my business mentor taught me, just don't talk bad about your wife. Ever. Don't talk bad about her. No matter what. Let people figure it out on their own. Because you're not a good judge of character when it comes to that shit. So, it's very similar to it. You know, what we hear in the household is what we repeat in life.
It's a good way.
And hats off to that generation. I'm 45, and I instill that. Like, my daughter will complain, and I will show her multiple reasons why she shouldn't be complaining. Did you hear mommy and daddy complain? No. Don't complain. Like, you're so blessed. And I think that parents don't even think about the long-term effect that has when that kid is growing up, especially going into the real world, about being a complainer.
Right.
You run a very successful business. You know, you're in charge of a very successful business, which we'll chat about in a bit. And you definitely have easier employees and more difficult employees.
100%. 100%. You know, 90% of your time on 10% of your
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I love that old blue collar, hardworking mentality.
One of the best things my parents gave me was that blue collar work ethic. passing it along to my son, passing it along to the younger generations. I think I'm 56, as I said earlier. I think we have lost the art of mentoring young men. I truly do believe that. Not enough men in our age group take the time to speak to either their kids or their friends' kids during the afternoon.
So talk to me about that. I know from an earlier conversation that you do a lot to give back. What types of things are you doing, and what types of things do you suggest others to do to be effective as you are to help build people's confidence and drive?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is I think adults need to get back to, talking to teenagers and talking to young men and women. We've created a culture where we're so isolated from each other and we communicate electronically. We very rarely, if you see other family members, you'll be at an event, and most of the people you're not talking to while you're at that event. But if we don't teach young men how to shake hands and look people in the eye, they won't have that self-confidence to get to the next portion of their life when they're on their own. They won't be able to apply for a school. They won't be able to successfully apply for a job. If we don't teach them how to make their bed, how to change oil, how to fix a tire.
How to not be on their cell phone during dinner.
And not to be on their cell phone during dinner.
Yeah.
If I can, I was telling you earlier, I took my grandson on a working cattle drive this weekend for the Central Florida Boys Ranch up in Live Oak. And what really impressed me was the residents of the ranch are all at-risk youth. Most polite people I've ever met in my life.
At-risk youth. Give us a good idea of what that is, because there's people that probably are going to say.
It's a great question. So an at-risk youth is somebody who is at that juncture in life where they have either the ability to recover and become a sustainable society member, or they're going to end up in just the nonstop prison industrial complex where they're going to go to jail, get out of jail, go back to jail, and just that's the rest of their life. It's a waste of a good person.
And unfortunately, I have a saying. I say, when I meet even an adult or a middle-aged, kid or whatever, 20-year-old, I can tell right away if that kid was taught right or that adult was taught right. And
that's fair.
And for me, it's sometimes really not their fault. They haven't had someone to teach them right.
Exactly right.
I wasn't taught right. I could do whatever I wanted to from the age of 15 on. I was selling drugs. I was getting in fights. I was doing some other pretty terrible stuff. And there was no one there to say, stop doing that.
Right.
There was no one there to also help me understand that being an attribute in this world is way more reinforcing than being a terror. And what I mean by that is, like, when you're out there helping people and engaging and doing healthy, happy, loving things, that reward is way better than the reward you're getting from getting in trouble all the time. I've gotten addicted to it. Very similar to the guy that spends all his money that he makes, right? Probably wasn't taught right.
Exactly.
But then you mentor somebody, and then they get addicted to seeing their bank account grow, and they learn that these materialistic things aren't important anymore. These are all things that, like, I feel are so important in youth today that just no one gets it.
100%.
Not nobody, but the majority. Yes.
Right? And we always see the worst parts of everything because of the way media and social media works, right? If it bleeds, it leads. When I look at the young men and women today, I see untapped potential. But to your point, we're not giving them the roadmap to success.
Yep.
Right? Our generation, when we were younger, it was, hey, go to school, go to work, put your time in, and your doors will open up. As that gets watered down year after year, the generations they're still the same people. They just don't have the guidance and the blueprint that we have. If you have kids and you're not training them, you've just got two feral human beings that are living in your house until they have an opportunity to get away.
Yep.
If nobody teaches a kid, the schools aren't going to teach them, not to get on the soapbox, but the kids have to have somebody to teach them to be men and women.
Yep.
That's the reality. Like I said earlier, if you can't shake a hand, you can't look in the eye, you can't introduce yourself, you can't not hold a cell phone during dinner.
Yep.
That one we're probably all guilty of to a certain extent.
Yeah, no, of course. But, I was out to eat the other day, and there was this couple sitting beside my family. And I'm telling you, for an hour, they were both eating on their cell phones. They didn't say one word to each other. I'm like, why the fuck are you guys even here?
Right.
Like, it's kind of, I have a good family dinner at my house, 2 to 3 times per week, to where we, like, really sit down and slow down a little bit. It's important, the interesting thing that you said, if you can't look another person in the eye and shake their hand, I always throw small stuff like that out that we forget about, right? So like the parents out there that are watching this, maybe start with that with your kid. Like that's a great starting point, and see how the kid changes after you say, hey, little Johnny, look him in the eyes and shake his hand. Like, are you too embarrassed to say that?
Right.
I think that's pretty what it comes down to. Oh, that's no big deal. Or my favorite is when I have a younger man tell me, I'll bump into him and say, oh, I apologize. And he'll be like, no, you're good. No shit, motherfucker, I'm good. I'm fucking 45 years old. You're 19. Don't fucking tell me I'm good. Say, that's okay, sir.
I know my coffee is good.
Yeah,
right?
I know shit. Or, you're fine, man. That's what they tell me, bro. Like, get the fuck out of here with that. So that's insulting shit to me. Like, kids should not be saying that to a grown man. And also, that saying is just, to me, it's
a lack of vocabulary.
It's a lack of vocabulary. And it's a lack of the ability to maybe open some doors for you. Because people never said that to my father or mother. You're good. Like, get out of here. My mother would have bitch slapped me. So, so before we get into some other stuff, talk to me about the growth out of the military, the growth into where you are now, the do's and don'ts of life, and we're all ears.
God, I've got a list of don'ts that probably a mile
Man,
long.
I can tell you what to do. Believe me. Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like I said earlier, I was a naval reservist. I was a corpsman. Went in 98, got my chance to serve, went to Iraq in 03. Came back from Iraq, went back to Iraq as a contractor for roughly the next 7 years. After I was done working for the companies that I worked for, I transitioned back here to Florida. My son was living in Florida at the time. And I went into the security industry, electronic and guarding. And just a high tempo, high stress, big financial business. And by the time 2015 rolls around, my life is now in shambles. I didn't give myself a chance to reacclimate. Just constantly moving, not dealing.
The decompression.
Yeah. When we did our warrior transition, which is what the Marine Corps and the Navy called it at the time, I was in a tent in Kuwait, filled out a form about the size of a A4 piece of paper, and here's a plane ticket, and you're on your way back home. As a reservist, there is no, hey man, let's get you down to decompress for a couple of weeks. It's give us your canteens and your whoobies and everything we gave you. I-95's over there.
Yeah, that's, so my next chapter, don't worry guys, I'm not getting rid of Corps. My next chapter is actually, I'm going to be doing, I own a lot of land. I'm a big hunter. And I want to do some additional decompression programs. Maybe 10 or 15 families a year. They get to come out to one of the farms or a big ranch that I have and get to spend time like slowly graduating 7 to 10 to 12 to 15 days, as long as they want to stay. And depending on, what's going on with them,
right,
have some tools there for them to kind of help with that transition. My resources are super vast due to Corps Medical. Like we can get on, I can get on any stage, listen to anybody play music. I can get to a football game. I can go sit and hear a CEO of a Fortune 500 company speak on a board. And, I'd like to help understand that veteran better and help them kind of make their life a little bit easier into the transition, because through our foundation, there's two things that are going on, which we've talked about. We can talk about here on the podcast. Number one, they're getting out and getting the Mr. T starter kit from the VA with medication, and they're getting completely sheltered mentally. And number two, they've been deployed, especially like my SF guys, they've been deployed for 50% of their grown life. Right. They haven't had the ability to build those resources and those relationships with civilians. And I feel like it would be really nice if I opened up my resources and tried to help those vets transition and find a long-term position to where they have a good brotherhood and community like they did in the military with a civilian job.
Well, that's such a, you hit it right there in the nail on the head. The processes for getting out of the military after you've been deployed 5, 10, 15 times, When you look at, we talked about 20th Group earlier. When you look at some of the National Guard units and the reserve units, they're being treated like active duty. I mean, they're not prepared for that constant deployment, constant machine is being, chewing you and spitting you up. There's no financial help. There's no emotional help. There's no real family help. And you come back to a broken family, a broken town, a broken psyche, and possibly a broken body.
Uh-huh.
The people that need the help are lining up every day for help, and we treat them as a commodity. Where if I go to the VA for help, I can go to the VA for money, I can go for the VA for medicine, and one is compliance with the other, right? If you don't, if you don't take your medicine or you don't go to your appointments, we're not going to give you the money that you earn by losing your arm or your leg or your soul. So when we, as people who have been relatively lucky in life, I always say I've got my fingers and toes and most of my soul, but we have the ability to get somebody who may have been, a National Guard mechanic who's been gone 6 out of the last 10 years.
And not to say that person didn't have trauma when they were
Correct.
there. I mean, you can be in a convoy driving to a base and freaking have something horrible happen.
100%. And honestly, man, just the the shock of where you are and what you're doing while your family is still trying to pay.
What's that like when you landed in Afghanistan? You said you were
Iraq.
When you landed in Iraq for the first time, obviously you had training and so on and so forth, but you're in a completely foreign place. You really, no matter how much training you have no fucking idea what to expect.
Correct. You're reacting.
What was going on in your brain when you touched down there and got off that carrier?
So when I arrived, we mobilized through Kuwait, through Camp Commando, and we went into southern Iraq from there. D+1. And it was just a overflow of information, an overflow of worst case scenario. It was, write your letter to your family, make sure your will and life insurance is up to date, and get on the truck, and these are the coordinates we need to go, and get in line on the highway, and off you go. And you're just sitting here going, oh, last Tuesday I was at Starbucks. Well, last Monday I was upset because I was late to work, or my kid didn't behave in school, and here I am, here's your weapon, here's your training, here's your time, and this is your now all-consuming life. You don't have contact with your family regularly. Your family is 6 weeks behind on their bills because the military is going from peacetime to wartime military, and the money goes as slow as everything else in the military. So you have a lot of worry before you even start to worry about your own safety.
And the creditors don't give a shit.
They don't care. Even with the Soldiers and Sailors Act, there's just way too much predatory lending. There's way too much predatory debt collection.
Yeah, I have a very, very good friend that came back to a complete financial nightmare from a very long deployment, very hard deployment, and came back not the same. Took them a long time to get back to regular, and the financial devastation just destroyed their entire family.
And it's very hard to recover. That was the same reason
why. Yeah, because the thing is like from what he told me, what he was doing was very, was on the the husher side of things, very, very quiet, and he couldn't have any contact for 2.5 months, 3 months, and didn't even realize what was going on because he's worried about staying alive and getting back to his family. Meanwhile, they're sitting there struggling, trying to figure out how to feed their fucking kids.
Exactly.
And that's a rough way. That's a rough way to go. It's a shame there's not a solution to that, but we can send billions of dollars to a country that doesn't even fucking benefit us in any way humanly possible. But that's a different conversation.
But there are solutions, right? There are solutions. And the question is where does that solution start? Does it start with us as people who are successful in sharing the wealth, so to speak, and the knowledge and the experience? Hopefully teaching them how to avoid the problems we had, or is it we rely on, a bureaucratic machine that really doesn't give a shit about us? And tell me at any point if I'm too much on a soapbox. But
no. Listen, Dana White said it right the other day. He said, "I'm never going to tell a man what to say or think. It's a free world. You speak how you want to speak, and I freaking respect the hell out of that."
That's fair.
I have people that I disagree with quite a bit. There's not too many of them that are core patients because we're kind of
still early.
We've kind of if I post a picture of a of a successful harvest or me training CQB, I will lose 300 followers every single time I do it. And it rebuilds, but like I back and forth on about 8,000 followers, 7,500. But it removes certain people that disagree with my standpoint, which is fine. Like, I don't really care.
That's the beauty of what we do and who we are.
Exactly.
Disagreement. You're supposed to be able to disagree.
Man, Cody and I had an hour and a half conversation about how he felt about things and how I felt about things. And, you know, that's my dude. Like, I love that guy a lot. We spent a lot of time together. And I respect him more for being able to have a gentleman's conversation about a topic that most people would end up in a fist fight over.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want to end up with a fist fight with Cody. So
No, yeah.
that's a bad day for me.
The Lion of Fallujah on his knee.
Yeah.
Interesting cat, man. Interesting cat.
Cody and I spent a lot of time. We never met face to face, but we met like over Zoom calls, and we chatted for almost a year and a half. We started working together, and then he came to my event last year. It was the first time that we met, and there was like an incident at the event that was like very uncomfortable, right? And someone there just had too much to drink and said something they shouldn't have said to somebody, and I had to throw him out of the event. And like, I walked down the driveway, and I'm like, dude, you just gotta go. It's like, you have to leave. And he got really mouthy with me, and then all of a sudden he's like, all right, I'll leave. And I turned around, Cody's behind me. And I was like, oh, I guess that worked, dude, you know? But I mean, and now we've hunted together this whole year, and we had a blast. And, you know, for those, especially for the kids out there, I have a lot of amazing people in my life from the military. Jason Redmond, Nick Kay, amazing dude. Byron Rogers, who's just a fucking stud. He's awesome. Got to know him real well this year. Cody, and they all have their real strong niche, right? Like, they really have these programs. I've sent my wife to Jason Redmond's program after some stuff that happened, and she needed that confidence of being able to protect herself. And that was an amazing program. Nick's program's awesome. Cody does stuff with kids to help them build confidence, troubled kids. This program's unbelievable. And he's like, it's fucking cool, man. Like, he spends a lot of time helping these like youngsters out, because that dude's seen it all, man.
Right.
He's seen it. He's seen you know, that the boy overseas that hasn't eaten in 4 or 5 days and had to see that person suffer, you know, and he's really gone through it, and, you know, came back, and he was in some rough shape, and has just conquered the world, man. So it's been awesome. And I mean, Nick Kay and Jason too, Byron too, they've been through it all. And I say to myself, man, those guys really have set themselves back in the business world because of the sacrifices they made for the country, right?
Yeah, because the learning curve is now 10 years, 15 years later than it would have been.
Exactly.
And the traits that you come out of the military with are, you know, showing up on time, wearing a uniform on correctly, you know, how to get to a place, how to do certain things, how to plan, and how to execute.
Yep.
But you leave high school and into the military, and nobody teaches you how to balance a checkbook.
Exactly.
Nobody teaches you the value of saving money or investing money wisely.
Yep.
We just constantly spin our wheels as young men as we transition from teenagers into manhood.
Yeah.
You know, the concept that we're supposed to figure out who we are and what we do in our 20s is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, what really impresses me is that, you know, for instance, like Nick Kumalatis, Jason, I mean, all the strategic partners at Core that were in the military, Josh Holyfield, these guys have really only been in the business world aggressively for 5 to 7 years, max, some less. When I look at how hard it is to start a startup business now, compared to when I did Core Medical 15 years ago, it's not easy. It's hard.
It takes capital and time.
It takes capital, time, and also the biggest thing for me in business is I've been in the business so long that I have someone for everything.
Sure.
There's zero time wasted if I need a toilet fixed in an office so it's operational, the AC turned back on, or I need a distributor to help me with this, that, and the other. I can make a phone call, boom, it's fixed.
And that's the way it should be. Those guys are building that, though.
And the problem is that they haven't had the time to build those relationships coming out, and you know, and they've been successful, and it's been it's an amazing thing to watch. And I try to help as much as I can there, but they've, and I've learned a lot from, from seeing their growth and, they're 1% of 1%ers. Like
Right.
they were successful in the military and they're successful in the civilian world. That's a
Exactly.
freaking serious case to carry. I mean, it's hard. So talk to me about what you're doing now.
Well, right now I'm an operations manager for a company called the Armories. 3 locations, all firearm retail. We've got about 45 employees, and probably close to 25 of those are veterans of one branch
Awesome.
or another. Company's super veteran supportive. They do a lot. No problem with VA appointments, any type of charity request. They're all in. I've been here 6 years now, and this is a kind of a place where I like to retire from, so to speak. They treat us real good. We are Central Florida is one of the biggest retailers of firearms in Central Florida.
We're going to put the link below here. And Matt's going to be at the event too this year, guys. So if you guys are looking for some support in the firearm world, I think he's probably a good resource. We're going to get into kind of what he has brought to the table for the event, and we'll be showing that off towards the end of the podcast. Talk to me about your day-to-day responsibilities, the difference of your life being in a routine versus when it's not in a routine, how you hold yourself accountable. We have a very similar background. I skied my entire life growing up. Did inverted aerials and moguls. I skied for a big freestyle team, traveled the whole country skiing. And I have the permanent frostbite to prove it from sitting on the side of a mountain waiting to do my runs. I was in the OTC Olympic training camp in my summers doing qualifications off the water ramps and stuff like that. And we also have the motorcycle thing in our in our the commonality, and then firearms and hunting and supporting our vets. You're a vet, I'm not, but it's interesting for me to hear, because we have so much in common, like what your thoughts are of the importance of having that routine and being being the same person every day at work and not bringing, the trauma that we have outside of work.
Great way of putting it.
And because for our listeners, there's a lot of people that aren't patients at core. Most of them are. I like to really kind of inspire people to get in that position to where they're like, I'm having a hard time like changing my routine. What do people do? Like, how do you do that? Because the office is funny. Like, Sid, we know where you are every second of the day because you're just like, we know where you're eating. We know what time you're training. We know what time we can call you, what time that we can't. We know what time that you go to bed at 8 o'clock at night, So talk to me about that.
It's easy, man. If it wasn't for routine, I'd probably go out of my mind. So my basic day, most of the time during the week, I'll start off at the gym. I have a long day. I think we mentioned that earlier, right? I drive 1,000 miles per week happily, because I love what I do. But for me to have a 12-hour work day, I've got to make time so my day has to get up earlier. I have to adjust certain things so I can be successful at it. My day-to-day is managing a heavily regulated industry and commodities, personnel, firearms, NFA, Class 3 items. Customer service is all we do, right? So it's safety, it's compliance, and it's good customer service is really the core of our business. If we can't have safe working environments, everybody has a gun. Everybody walks in the door with a gun, walks out with a gun. All of our employees are firearms guys. If we have an accident, one is we have, we've just had, God forbid, a hurt or a dead employee, but we can't set that tone to our customer base. We have to be the mentors. We've got to be able to teach people, new shooters, old shooters. Everybody has to be opening to learning. And that's one of the big things I really think in success of the veteran community is their ability to learn and adapt. So I take a lot of things in my daily day-to-day is, are my people safe? Are we compliant with the ATF regulations? Are we providing good customer service? Those things enable us to, to make a living as employees, and for the ownership to make money. We're a business. We pay the taxes to be in business. So there's scheduling, there's financial understanding of our business, there's sales, there's products. Like I'm be in Texas for a buyer show for NBS, Nation's Best Sport, this weekend. And we have to keep up on the trends. We've got to see what people like, see what people want. But we have an obligation to conduct business in a very regimented way so that a person who is not allowed to own a firearm by law doesn't get a firearm.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually three really good friends that were pretty high up in kind of celebrities in the ATF world. My buddy Lou and Chris, Mike, and they'll be at the event this year.
Awesome.
And it's interesting to see, Lou. I'll take Lou to my gun club down here in Fort Lauderdale and be like, bro, these people don't like me in here. Trust me. It's like, but that's really not true. I mean,
We got to be partners with them.
yeah, exactly. I mean, the reality of it is they have a job to do. They didn't set the rules, and they're doing the job just like you're doing the job, having to tell someone, listen, man, there's 7 days before you can have this weapon if you don't have a concealed carry. Or, hey, kind of judging that sale. If someone comes in there and they're a maniac, I'm sure you've had some turndowns based on the fact that you just don't want to sell them a freaking firearm.
Oh, weekly almost.
Yeah.
So when I look at...
what's that like?
So first of all, the National Shooting Sports Foundation lays out guidelines on what to look for. So you've got a professional organization that kind of gives you standards to go through. ATF says, hey, you've got to do a background check. You are the first and last check in safety and compliance. So in Florida, person comes in to buy a firearm. Everything should be a normal transaction. It's like buying a car. Some people might be a little bit more nervous, but you can see nervous for a real reason and nervous for a dishonest reason. People that aren't allowed to own guns generally know they're not allowed to own guns, right?
Yeah. Mel Chancey.
Funny you say it. I heard it when I was coming in. He was talking to Tommy.
Yeah.
About being his reason why he can't, be involved in the firearms events.
Yeah. No, he's actually, he's like, okay, he's great with it. I mean, which is kind of crazy because Mel's really turned his life around, and Mel would be at this point, as crazy as it sounds, he'd be a responsible gun owner.
Oh, probably. I agree.
He'd
with
be
you 100%.
amazing. Like he would have a firearm to protect his family. Mel has no reason in the world to go back to that life that he was living. Right. He freaking hates. He doesn't hate it because it made him grow to who he is today.
But he understands it better now.
But he understands it better, and he's he lives vicariously through me. He's like, oh man, I sent him videos of me shooting CQB and stuff, and he's like, that's cool, and he'd love to do it, but you know what? He lost that ability to do it, and he's fine with it, and there's it's just funny because our entire group of strategic partners at Core, we all shoot. So when it's time to go to the gun range, Mel's taking off with one of the staff members to go hang out somewhere.
Oh, I get that, man. I get that. It's it's an interesting way we've created where you can be a felon and not have the ability to defend yourself once you've paid your price to society. A whole nother avenue for discussion, but
a muzzleloader crossbow.
Yeah, muzzleloader. People come into my store and say, "Hey, can I get a black powder pistol?" We understand what you're doing here.
Yeah.
But the safe and legal transaction of firearms is paramount. We have to partner in a positive way with the federal government, and their tool right now is the ATF. So for us to be successful, we play by the rules. We try to be a little bit more diligent, in how we're sizing up people for the sale. We invest in our employees. We invest in them to learn how to read people to a certain extent. These are the signs that you look for if someone's making a straw purchase or trying to make an illegal purchase.
Yeah. Explain. I mean, I know what it is. Explain a straw purchase, because there's a lot of people out there that are a victim of straw purchase and they don't even realize.
Unwilling. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you. So it's illegal for one person to buy a firearm in the United States for the sole purpose of giving it to somebody else who's prohibited to buy a firearm. So
even someone who is prohibited, they buy it within 30 days, they can't transfer it to that person as well, correct?
Depending on the locality.
Okay.
So in Florida, if you're on the prohibited list, and you fit, I think it's 8 criteria, and you come in and you want to buy a firearm, and you've made it to the point where we're accepting money and we're asking you to fill out a background check, right? The first step is, hey, we think you're okay to buy a gun. The second step is you're filling out a form honestly, right? You fill out the form honestly, and we believe you filled it out honestly. If you come in smelling of marijuana saying, I don't do drugs on the form, we're going to deny you, even though it's legal for medicinal purposes. It's still banned by the federal government. if you come in and we feel that you can fill out the form honestly and you filled it out, and we now submit it to the FDLE, Florida uses its own system.
Yep.
And the FDLE says go ahead, and you come in and you don't have a concealed carry, you have a 3 business day wait. Or if you have a concealed carry and it comes back that day, you can take it that day. The challenge that we have is when somebody different comes in and says, oh, he was meant to buy it for me. This is not my name. Or maybe a transfer had the wrong name on it. Or the person who's buying the gun is acting in a way that they don't know how to fill out a form because they're unsure if they're buying it for themselves or somebody else.
Got it.
So a straw purchase, again, is somebody who's buying a firearm for somebody else who's not allowed to have a firearm. That's in broad strokes.
Got it. So if I go in and buy a firearm for Joe Schmo tomorrow, if I go in and buy a firearm for myself tomorrow and then give it to someone the next day, is that legal?
It's a really gray area, right? Because you're
which in your world would be illegal.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Got it.
And the reason I say that is because the concept of personal property does exist with firearms, right? Florida still allows a person-to-person transaction if you think that person is not prohibited to own a firearm.
Exactly.
And
there's zero transfer. It's here's the firearm. See you later.
Correct.
Got it.
So for me, we're federally licensed. We can't. If you go, hey man, I'm buying this. I'm going to give it to my cousin when he comes into town in 2 weeks. Well, I can't sell you that firearm because you've already told me you're going to immediately give it to somebody else. The background check paperwork, the 4473 now says, are you buying this with the intent to give it to somebody else?
It also asks you if you're non-binary.
They ask you if you're non-binary, but not for suppressors, honestly.
Yeah.
When that question hasn't made it onto the class 3 list.
Whatever.
I've yet to see anybody choose that.
Yeah. That's what somebody else said too. I have a buddy up the street. I'm going to take you by to meet when we get out of here. He said the same thing. So, with you being in the firearm world, what are some of like the biggest daily hurdles of going back to like being consistent and being on a schedule? It's an intense, stressful business. I know that you probably handle it really well because of the other stresses you've been through in your life. It does help, right? What would you say to someone as far as going back to balance? Like when do you turn off? When do you turn on? And like what are the two different mats? Like what mat do you get outside of work? What mat do you get inside of work?
Well, it's a great question. I like to think consistency is my strength.
That's a great answer.
I try to be the same person all the time.
Cool.
So I have my own ethics and morals I conduct my life with, and those are the same good business traits that people look for. So I know my employers know I'm not going to steal from them because I'm just not a thief. I'm not going to lie for them or lie for a customer because it's just not who I am. The successes that I have in business are generally because I take measured approaches to things. I look and ask questions. Asking questions is a thing that doesn't happen as much anymore.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. What's your opinion on that? Why that happens?
It's a confrontation. You go into Chick-fil-A, right? And you see there's a mess within feet of an employee. And I say Chick-fil-A, I love Chick-fil-A. I don't want to get sued, so we'll say Chick-fil-X.
Yeah.
It's a confrontation. It's an interpersonal commentary where you have to ask somebody to give you information or money or a transaction. You have to say, hey, can you give me? And if I don't have that core background of shaking hands, looking in the eye, growing up in a mature way, or growing into a mature person with some guidance, that confrontation can be core shaking for somebody of a weaker fortitude.
Yeah, I mean, so I have definitely experienced the fact that interaction, the first interaction, I can tell whether I'm dealing with a confident individual or a non-confident individual. My business mentor, who's like one of the most amazing guys, he says, Sid, if you can make a woman laugh and make her feel safe, that's your girl for life. She'll love you forever. And it's the same thing in like interaction in business. Like when I can tell if I walk into a boardroom who's in charge of that meeting without anyone speaking. You know, body language, being confident, and that's something that takes some time to gain.
100% correct.
But the hard part is that, like, going back to what we were saying before, I feel like the youth these days are being set back from that confidence builder because they're just not, it's not part of vocabulary anymore. Just like you said, people aren't talking. I've been an entrepreneur. I've had one job that I've been paid W-2 on in my entire life. I've only had one employer. He was amazing. His name's Phil. His partner, not so much.
Subtle.
To me, yeah, whatever. I'd say to his face. To make a long story short, I have definitely seen, like you said before, the fact of, you know, when I now own a business, right? My staff needs to know that I'm there to protect them, right? I made up a saying that Nick K loves. Strong chief, strong tribe, right? And for me, I'm very, very confident, but I also carry something called humility, which isn't taught either. And when it comes to what you said is, you know, hey, I don't really understand this. Can you explain it to me? That's where a confident man can also have humility. And I ask questions too all the time. And I think it's a very, very important part of life. And what also is, humility is a great way to build a relationship too. So I learn from people. I know that you know way more about firearms than I do. I know that you know a lot more about the military than I do. I want to learn it. Hey, Matt, can I ask you a question? Can I take you for a cup of coffee? I want to understand more about this. Well, that builds your confidence. You're like, wow, that guy just really had that humility. But people don't do that anymore. It's so easy to get a yes out of everybody because they don't want to have a conflict.
Passive least resistance.
Yeah, exactly. So that type of stuff is pointed out in this podcast quite a bit. You know, especially when Byron's on here, he has this very, very strong "America's not making men anymore" type of impact on the world, and he feels like, you know, we need to have a stronger community when it comes to that. What do you see that getting worse and worse, or do you see it getting better in situations? Like,
it's a good question, right? So a lot of it has to do with how early people are getting involved with their own kids or their grandkids.
Yeah.
When I look at where school systems have become, if we're not getting involved with our kids or our grandkids, it used to be your neighbor kids. It used to be when we were growing up. Remember, I'm going to tell your mother if you don't shut your mouth.
Or my mother wasn't home. She locked the door on me. I'd go sit at my neighbor's house and do my homework. And she'd cook for me.
That doesn't happen anymore.
No.
Very rarely do we even know most of our neighbors anymore. When I look at young men and women, I look at untapped potential.
Yep.
We'll ask a lot of our youth. We really do. You know, if you go into selfless service and you go into the military, you go into public health, we're asking a tremendous amount of you, you know, with maybe a little or no reward.
And you know what else is interesting that you said that? I think that the way, and this is just from conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, I think by the way you were brought up, you stood a better chance because of the way your parents taught you than the way kids are taught now.
There's definitely a difference.
Big
difference. Definitely a difference. I have a younger sister, you know, same pathway she was going through. You know, and she's the CEO of a hair product company now.
Oh, really?
You know, both of us
super successful.
Yeah, we're both just because our parents laid a good foundation of ethics and morals. And we, as I always say, they gave us the tools. I give you a tool. It's really up to you to have the wherewithal to execute with that tool.
Yes, exactly.
And I think a lot of what happens these days is the lack of execution because there's no accountability, and we allow way too many influences on our youth.
Yep.
That have nothing to do with the family.
Social media kind of makes it a little bit different too.
Well, that's my point, right?
Yeah,
so
it's
you've got
hard.
more people have access to our youth right now than their parents do on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's my big goal this year is to start to impact parents out there to start to impact their kids a little bit more. You know, my oldest daughter, I have a stepson from my first marriage, Jordan. I love this kid more than like most anything in the world. He's an unbelievable kid. He's done great things with himself. Very successful at 23 years old. Handsome, stays in routine, doesn't get off track. it's amazing. My daughter, same way. Like I will celebrate my kids because they are amazing kids. And I feel like there's not enough interaction. I feel like kids now are just allowed to do things that aren't productive more than ever. I don't see kids outside playing anymore. I don't see kids. I see a entire beautiful park on a Saturday and Sunday fucking empty. Yeah. And I would have given my right arm back in the day to have a park like that, instead of just having one seesaw back and forth that you get
made of metal.
Yeah, made of metal, exactly. So, but thank you for that. That was some great information. And again, guys, from this one, my challenge is: are your kids looking people in the eye and shaking their hands? Matt over here brought that to my attention. I've lost sight of it, but that's the challenge for this week's podcast. So let's talk about the event, Matt.
Oh, excited.
Okay, well, I'm excited that you came. You know, we got to speak on the phone. You told Brandon that you wanted to get involved a little bit. The Armory wanted to get involved a little bit. I know you guys do a lot for veterans. You do a lot for first responders. You do quite a bit for kids as well. Is that?
Right.
Yep. And you're kind of in charge of dictating how that stuff goes, or you have a good say in it?
Yeah, I have a good say in it. Influencer, I guess, is the word to use these days.
Okay.
Also executing. You know, hey, we have a charity coming up. Take care of this. That type of thing.
So you got Hoot and Young to donate a nice bottle of bourbon or whiskey. And we're excited about that. And then you also had these very cool Core Medical PMags made that will hold 5.56 or 300 blackout. So that's pretty cool. And then there's also a big kicker that came along with it. And I always have to say we do practice gun safety on here. But guys, if you are attending the event, this right here, the Core Medical PMag branded, will be one of the auction items this year. Courtesy and super grateful to the Armory for doing this. It's all Cerakoted, really cool colors. And it's all Cerakoted, really cool colors. You know, you got a red dot on there, and you know, it's great. You know, these companies don't have to do this. You know what I mean? And it's like I didn't even have to ask. You're like, hey man, I'm giving you guys a beautiful AR, and you know that really it builds my confidence a little bit. And so I have a lot of gratitude. So thank you so much for that. And, you know, I have people coming out of the woodwork that want to help. And, you know, the fact that you just drove all the way over here to come on an hour podcast with me and hang out means so much. The event's really important to me. It's really the only thing I really brag about these days. Our event at my home in South Carolina is very special. I make it very affordable, very inexpensive. You know, our foundation does quite a bit to help out with that. We support my best friend, Johnny Strong. His son was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma at the age of,
I read that.
At 6 months old. And we donate some money to him every year just to kind of help out because, you know, they live in a hospital pretty much back and forth. And Johnny's been doing he's had a really great 4 years with his scans. And John just left today to head back home. Amazing guy. And then we do the Boxes of Hope, which is in Chicago. Mel Chancey's foundation. He feeds about 300 kids lunch and dinner every day. Incredible. 365 days a year that just don't eat because their families don't have the abilities to pay for it.
We used to do that as a community.
Yeah, we used to do that as a community. Or you knew there was a family in the neighborhood that didn't have money and you'd bring over dinner.
Out.
Exactly. There's another challenge. Go do something like that for somebody. And then we have Aerial Recovery, Child Trafficking Group. That'll be there this year. And then we have the Core Foundation, which does suicide prevention. We help veterans that can't afford HRT, which is the root of the issue for a lot of suicides, guys, in the veteran community, because low testosterone equals very foggy mentality capabilities, no drive, and depression. And, you know, we help correct that. And we've had some amazing success stories. And, you know, stuff like this really helps us. So I want to thank you for that. And Matt will probably be out there shooting with us and hanging out and having a blast. So we're excited about that. And that's February 22nd, 23rd, 24th. Not sure how many seats we have left, but not too many. This year there'll be about 250, 275 people there. And if you're interested, give us a buzz. If not, next year we'll be on the chopping block for you. And Matt, once again, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh,
It was
absolutely,
awesome.
my honor and pleasure, my friend.
It was great. I love wisdom from a guy that's a decade older than me. But as you can see, Core is doing its job. You look amazing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great, man. And you're setting examples for a lot of other people out there. I tell people all the time, especially guys that come on and have your energy and drive and look great. Go to your high school reunion and go look around, and you'll be like, man, that dude in high school that was such a stud can't even see his private
Life
parts
beat him
anymore.
down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And that mentality of bouncing back, staying healthy, staying in routine is a big thing on this podcast. So thank you for inspiring people today. You did an amazing job. And guys, thank you for your support. Matt, once again, thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, man.